The first thing my husband ever asked me to promise wasn't on our wedding day. It wasn't in church. It wasn't in front of our families. It happened 27 days later, long after everyone believed we had settled into married life. It was nearly midnight. A hard rain beat against the farmhouse roof. The oil lamp on our kitchen table was almost out. Isaac quietly locked the front door. Then he did something I had never seen him do before. He checked every window, every latch, every curtain, not once, twice. I laughed softly. "Are we expecting someone?" He didn't answer. Instead, he reached beneath one of the loose floorboards beside the fireplace. I had cleaned that room dozens of times. I never knew the floorboard could even move. He lifted out a small cloth bundle, old, covered in dust, carefully tied with faded brown string. He held it against his chest for several long seconds, almost like it belonged to someone he still missed. Then he looked directly into my eyes. His voice barely rose above a whisper. "Ellaner, if anything ever happens to me, promise me you will never tell anyone what you're about to see." The smile disappeared from my face. "What is it?" "I can't tell you until you promise." I stood there, completely confused. We had been married less than a month. I trusted him. He trusted me. Or so I believed. Why would my own husband ask me to promise something before I even knew what it was? "I don't understand." "I know. But I need your word first." Outside, thunder rolled across the fields. Inside, the silence between us felt even louder. I looked at the bundle again. It wasn't large, no bigger than a family Bible. Yet the way Isaac held it made it seem heavier than anything I'd ever seen. Finally, I whispered, "I promise." He slowly untied the string, folded back the old cloth. Inside were dozens of yellowed letters, every one of them sealed, every one of them untouched. Every one of them carried a different family name: Mast, Byler, Hostetler, Miller, Yoder, Schrock, Troyer. I recognized nearly every surname in our district. "What are these?" Isaac didn't answer immediately. Instead, he gently picked up one envelope. Across the front, someone had written only 6 words: "Never let this story be told." A cold feeling settled in my chest. Who wrote these? My grandfather. And the others? They never knew. I stared at him. "What do you mean? They never knew?" He carefully placed the envelope back inside the bundle, then quietly said something I have never forgotten. "My family has carried another family's miracle for almost 70 years, and no one knows it happened." I honestly thought I had misunderstood him. What miracle? Again, he looked toward the window, almost as though he expected someone to be listening. "I'll explain. But once you know, you can never unknow it." Looking back now, that sentence changed my life more than my wedding vows ever did. My name is Ellaner Kaufman. I was 23 years old when I married Isaac Troyer. We lived on a modest farm outside Holmes County, Ohio. Our life was wonderfully ordinary. We woke before sunrise, milked cows, worked the fields, shared evening meals with neighbors, attended church every other Sunday. Nothing about our marriage suggested hidden mysteries. Isaac was the quietest man I had ever known, not cold, simply thoughtful. He never interrupted people, never raised his voice, never hurried a conversation. Children adored him because he repaired broken toys without accepting a single penny. Older neighbors trusted him because he always arrived first whenever someone needed help. If anyone had asked me then, I would have said I knew everything about my husband. I was wrong. Over the next several days, little things began making sense. Once every month, a stranger always arrived before sunrise. Isaac never invited him inside. Instead, the 2 men walked behind the old windmill where no one could hear them. When they returned, the stranger always carried one sealed envelope. Isaac always carried another. Neither envelope was ever opened in front of me. Then there were the wagon trips, at least twice each month. Isaac disappeared before daylight, returned after sunset. Whenever I asked where he had been, his answer never changed. Helping someone. Helping who? He never said. One afternoon, I noticed something else. Inside our pantry stood 8 large jars of homemade apple butter. By the following morning, only 4 remained. I hadn't used them. Isaac hadn't eaten them. They had simply disappeared. When I quietly mentioned it during supper, he smiled. I must have forgotten to tell you. Told me what? I gave them away. To who? He looked down at his plate. Someone who needed them. That answer should have satisfied me. Instead, it created another question. How many times had he quietly given things away without ever mentioning it? A week later, I found another surprise. Hidden inside the family Bible was a folded list, not of expenses, not of debts, just names. Nearly 60 of them. Some had tiny check marks beside them, others had dates. Several names had little stars drawn beside them. What is this? I asked. Isaac gently took the paper from my hands. His smile disappeared. Then he quietly folded it again. I hoped you wouldn't find that yet. Before I continue, I want to ask you something. If the person you loved most asked you to keep a secret that could change the way an entire community saw them, would you keep that promise? Or would you believe the truth deserved to be shared? Tell me in the comments. Because I believed I already knew my answer. I couldn't have been more wrong. That same evening, just as the sun disappeared behind the trees, someone knocked on our front door. 3 slow knocks. Isaac looked toward the cloth bundle beneath the floor, then toward me. His face turned pale. He quietly whispered, "They've come for the letters." And in that moment, I realized those 70-year-old envelopes were never meant to stay hidden forever. The knocking came again. 3 slow knocks, not louder, not faster, exactly the same. Isaac closed his eyes. For a brief moment, he looked like a man carrying far more than a bundle of old letters. Then he whispered, "They're early." I had never heard those words before. They? He nodded once. "I need you to trust me." Without another word, he tucked the cloth bundle beneath his coat and walked toward the front door. I followed, not because I wanted to overhear, because I was finished being left behind. When Isaac opened the door, 3 elderly Amish men stood quietly on the porch. One was Bishop Jonas Miller. I recognized him immediately. The other 2 were strangers. One carried an old leather satchel. The oldest man looked directly at Isaac. "We must speak." Isaac glanced at me. "She knows." The 3 men exchanged nervous looks. The bishop slowly removed his hat. "How much?" Isaac answered honestly. "Only the beginning." The oldest man sighed. "I was afraid this day would come." Before anyone could stop me, I spoke. "Would someone please tell me what is happening?" The bishop looked at me kindly, then at Isaac. "It is your decision." Isaac remained silent. The bishop nodded. "So be it." Without another word, the 3 men walked into our farmhouse. The oldest man carefully placed the leather satchel on our kitchen table. Then he slowly opened it. Inside were more letters, dozens of them. Some looked almost 100 years old. Others were much newer. Every envelope carried a different family name, exactly like the bundle Isaac had shown me. I looked from the satchel to Isaac's bundle. "What are these?" The oldest man finally spoke. "They are promises." "What kind of promises?" "The kind no one was ever supposed to remember." I frowned. "I don't understand." Isaac walked to the table. He gently untied his bundle, then placed it beside the satchel. Together. The 2 collections looked almost identical. The bishop smiled sadly. For 70 years, 2 Amish families have protected the same story. Neither family knew the other still existed. My heart skipped. What? The bishop carefully unfolded one of the oldest letters. It began during the winter of 1954. There was a terrible fire. A young Amish family lost everything. Their barn, their horses, their crops, even their home. I listened without saying a word. The father refused charity. He told everyone, "God will provide." The bishop smiled, and he did. But not the way anyone expected. The oldest man continued the story. Your husband's grandfather quietly sold half his own land. No one knew. He used the money to secretly rebuild the other family's farm. But he made one condition. What condition? No one could ever know where the money came from. I looked at Isaac. So that's the secret? He slowly shook his head. No, that's only the beginning. He opened another letter. Inside was a faded receipt. Then another. A photograph. Old maps. Handwritten journals. Every document told another piece of the same story. Families helping families. Without names, without credit, without recognition. One page caught my attention immediately. Across the top, someone had written, "Never allow gratitude to become debt." I read it twice, 3 times. What does this mean? Isaac smiled softly. My grandfather believed if people knew who helped them, they would spend the rest of their lives trying to repay the kindness. He never wanted that. He wanted them to simply live again. I slowly sat down. The room suddenly felt much quieter. Everything I had wondered about over the last month. The disappearing food, the missing apple butter, the monthly visitors, the envelopes, the strange list inside the Bible. It all fit together. Then the oldest man reached into the satchel one last time. He removed a small wooden ledger. Unlike the letters, it wasn't sealed. He placed it in front of me. "This belongs to you now." I looked confused. "Me?" He nodded. "Every generation chooses one new keeper. The next keeper has always been the wife." I looked at Isaac in surprise. "You knew?" He smiled. "My father told me on the day before our wedding." "Then why didn't you tell me?" His eyes filled with emotion. "Because the final decision was never mine." "What do you mean?" He took my hand. "If I told you too early, you might feel trapped. I wanted you to choose it freely." The bishop nodded. "A promise given without freedom isn't really a promise." I understood. For the first time, no one had been hiding the truth to control me. They had been protecting my right to choose. Then, the oldest man opened the ledger. Most of the pages were filled. Only one remained blank. Across the top, someone had already written today's date. Beneath it, only 7 words. "The next promise begins with Ellaner Kaufman." My heart began beating faster. I looked at the empty page, then at the 3 elderly men, finally at Isaac. "What happens if I say no?" The bishop smiled. "Then we thank you. We close the ledger, and the tradition ends peacefully. No guilt, no pressure, no disappointment, only a choice." I looked down at the blank page once more. For 70 years, one family had quietly carried another family's hope. Now, the future of that promise was sitting in front of me, and whatever answer I gave would change far more than my own marriage. Mrs. Miller held the old photograph in both hands. Her smile slowly disappeared. She looked at the faded faces again, then back at Isaac. "I know this picture." No one answered. The room became so quiet I could hear the old clock ticking behind me. Mrs. Miller stepped closer to the table. "My father had a copy of this." She gently traced one young man's face with her finger. "He always said this was the last picture taken before the fire." Isaac's hands tightened beneath the table. The bishop calmly stood. "That was many years ago." Mrs. Miller nodded. "It was. But father spent the rest of his life searching for the man standing beside his best friend." She pointed toward Isaac's grandfather. He believed that man saved our family. Every elder in the room remained silent. I looked toward Isaac. His face had become completely still. Mrs. Miller laughed softly. It sounds foolish now. But Father never stopped looking, even when he became an old man. He used to say, "Somewhere there is a family carrying my thank you." She smiled sadly. He died without finding them. Those words settled heavily over the room. I finally understood why the letters had remained hidden for 70 years. It wasn't only a promise, it had become part of another family's history. Mrs. Miller carefully placed the photograph back onto the table. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt." She handed me one of the warm apple pies. "We simply wanted to welcome you to the community." I accepted it with trembling hands. "Thank you," she smiled. "I hope your marriage is filled with honesty." The sentence struck every person in the room. Honesty. After the Millers left, no one spoke for nearly a full minute. Finally, the bishop closed his eyes. "They came closer today than anyone ever has." The oldest elder nodded. The truth almost reached them. Isaac slowly sat down. "I don't know how much longer we can protect it." I looked around the room. Should it still be protected? Every eye turned toward me. The bishop answered carefully. "What do you mean?" I took a deep breath. "For 70 years, this secret has protected one family's dignity. But another family has spent 70 years wondering who changed their lives." The room fell silent again. No one had ever asked that question. Isaac looked at me. "I've wondered the same thing." The bishop folded his hands. "When your grandfather began this promise, he believed anonymous kindness was the purest kind. He never imagined it would continue for generations." I nodded slowly. "So maybe the promise isn't only about keeping a secret. Maybe it's about protecting the reason behind it." The elders exchanged thoughtful glances. The oldest man smiled. "Your grandfather would have liked that answer." He reached into the leather satchel and removed one final envelope. Unlike all the others, it was addressed to me, for the next keeper. I looked at Isaac. "You've never seen this?" He shook his head. "No. It was never mine to open." I carefully unfolded the letter. It was written by Isaac's grandfather only weeks before he died. "My dear daughter, if this letter has reached you, then you have already learned something many people never understand. The greatest gift is not helping someone. The greatest gift is protecting their ability to stand with dignity after they have been helped." A tear rolled down my cheek. The letter continued. "One day you may wonder whether this secret should finally be told. If that day comes, ask only one question. Will revealing it help them, or only satisfy our desire to be known?" I stopped reading. No one in the room spoke. The answer was suddenly clear. The story had never been hidden to protect our family. It had been hidden to protect theirs. Isaac reached for my hand. "What do you think?" I smiled through my tears. "I think your grandfather finished his work long ago. But now, it's our turn to continue it." The bishop smiled for the first time that evening. He gently closed the old ledger. "Then the promise lives another generation." As the elders prepared to leave, Isaac quietly looked toward the fireplace. "I was afraid this secret would destroy our marriage." I squeezed his hand. It almost did, but only because silence lasted longer than trust. Outside, the evening sun disappeared behind the hills. Inside, the letters were carefully wrapped once again. I believed the mystery had finally ended. I had no idea that the very next morning, a visitor would arrive carrying something that had been missing since the fire of 1954. And it would force every promise in that room to be tested one final time. The next morning, I was the first person awake. The farmhouse was completely silent. For a long time, I simply sat beside the kitchen window, watching the sunrise over the fields. The letters rested on the table in front of me, the old ledger, the faded photograph, my grandfather-in-law's final message. Everything I had learned during the past 2 days had changed the way I looked at my husband, but one question still remained. What would happen now? Just after sunrise, Isaac joined me. He quietly poured 2 cups of coffee. Neither of us spoke. Finally, he looked at me. I hardly slept. I didn't either. He smiled weakly. I kept thinking about Mrs. Miller. So did I. He sat across from me. Do you think we did the right thing? I looked toward the letters. I think your grandfather protected something beautiful. But I also think every promise deserves to be understood. Isaac nodded slowly. Before either of us could say another word, someone knocked gently on the front door. Only once, not 3 times, just once. Isaac opened it. Standing outside was Mrs. Miller. She carried a small wooden chest no bigger than a loaf of bread. I hope I'm not disturbing you. Not at all. She smiled. I found something yesterday after I returned home. She carefully placed the little chest on our kitchen table. My father always told me, if I ever found the owners, I should return this. Isaac looked confused. The owners? Mrs. Miller nodded. We never knew who they were. My father believed this belonged to the family that saved ours. She slowly opened the chest. Inside rested an old silver pocket watch, a broken pair of spectacles, and one folded letter. The paper had turned almost brown with age. Mrs. Miller smiled sadly. The letter was never opened. We couldn't bring ourselves to read something that wasn't ours. She gently pushed it toward Isaac. I think it belongs here. After thanking her, we watched her buggy disappear down the road. The farmhouse became quiet once again. Isaac carefully unfolded the letter. His hands trembled. The handwriting was immediately familiar, his grandfather's. The date read, February 18th, 1954. He began reading aloud. If this letter ever returns to my family, then God has answered a prayer I never expected him to answer. Isaac paused. Neither of us spoke. He continued, the family I helped must never know my name, not because I fear their gratitude, but because I fear their burden. If they spend their lives trying to repay me, they will never feel truly free. I felt tears running down my face. The letter continued. One day, perhaps my own grandchildren will wonder whether the truth should finally be spoken. If that day comes, remember this. Kindness is never measured by the number of people who know about it. It is measured by the number of lives that quietly become better because of it. Isaac lowered the letter. Neither of us could speak. At that moment, everything finally became clear. The secret had never existed to make one family appear generous. It had existed so another family would never feel indebted. Just then, the bishop arrived. He listened quietly as Isaac read the letter once more. When it ended, the bishop smiled. I believe your grandfather has answered the question all of us have carried. The oldest elder nodded. The promise continues. Then the bishop looked directly at me. Ellaner, the decision is yours. I looked toward the wooden ledger, then at Isaac, then toward the road where Mrs. Miller's buggy had disappeared. I'll continue it. The bishop smiled. Why? I answered without thinking. Because someday another family will need hope, and they deserve to receive it, without wondering how they'll ever repay it. No one spoke. They simply smiled. The bishop opened the ledger to its final blank page. He handed me his fountain pen. I wrote only one sentence. Today I learned that the greatest kindness is the one that leaves another person's dignity untouched. The bishop closed the ledger. This will be remembered. Years passed. Isaac and I became the new keepers. Sometimes we repaired a roof before sunrise. Sometimes we left baskets of food on lonely porches. Sometimes we quietly paid a doctor's bill. Sometimes all we did was leave fresh bread where it was needed most. No notes, no names, no recognition, only quiet kindness. Nearly 30 years later, our oldest granddaughter, Sarah, was helping me clean the attic. She noticed the familiar cloth bundle. "What are these?" I smiled. "The greatest inheritance our family owns." She laughed. "They're only old letters." I handed her the very first one. She read it silently, then looked at me with tears in her eyes. "Grandma, did Grandpa really do all this?" I smiled. "No, our family did. And now, one day, so will yours." She hugged me tightly. "I promise." Looking back now, people often ask what the greatest secret of my marriage was. They expect a shocking answer, a hidden fortune, a family scandal, a forbidden truth. Instead, the greatest secret my husband never wanted me to share was that true kindness asks for nothing in return. Not applause, not recognition, not even gratitude. If you've stayed with me until the very end, I'd like to ask you one question. Has someone ever changed your life without asking for credit? If they have, tell me in the comments, because the world needs more stories about quiet goodness. And perhaps, someone reading your story today will become the answer to another person's prayer tomorrow.